Good morning, Birmingham Unitarian Church. Good morning. Welcome to all, whether you're visiting us for the first time or have been here many times before. Whether you're joining us here in the sanctuary or watching remotely via Zoom or watching the recording later, it's good to connect with you. Children will be with us in the sanctuary for the service today. The family room, which is located just to the left at the back of the sanctuary, with audio of the service piped in, is open for parents and children. And care is also available in our nursery on the lower level for infants and children through age 5. By greeting our virtual neighbors, we build a bridge between online and in-person participants. First, we'll project on our screen the image of folks who are with us on Zoom. And if you're comfortable doing so, please turn on your camera and give us a wave. Now we who are gathered here in the sanctuary are invited to turn and face the camera in the back and give the folks on Zoom a wave. Coffee and conversation will follow the service in Hodes Hall, which is located to the left after you exit the sanctuary. Our newcomer table is a place where visitors and newcomers can meet and chat with each other and with members of the congregation. All are encouraged to drop by this table, just look for the colorful sign. And there'll also be an opportunity for a virtual coffee hour on Zoom after the service ends. Whenever, however, and wherever we connect with BUC, we are building this beloved community.
It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention. Then patch a few words together. And don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but the doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak.
Good morning. Good morning. Please stand as you are willing and able to sing hymn number 389, Gathered Here.
Well, good morning, my beloved scoundrels. Did you remember to go easy on yourself this week? A little easier on yourself? No, all right. It takes practice. Did you remember to go easier on the other scoundrels in your life? In a little bit, it takes practice. Well, I'm delighted to be back with you all. It seems like we just had last Sunday yesterday, but here we are again. We're going to open our service with the Hindu poet Kalidasa's Salutation to the Dawn. Kalidasa writes, "Look to this day. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence. The bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow only a vision. But today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day."
The mission of Birmingham Unitarian Church includes action towards positive change in the world. One way we live into our mission is by giving half of our weekly offering to a nonprofit organization that shares our values and addresses needs in the community. To suggest a nonprofit for this donation, please check the BUC website under Justice to find the application form. Our shared offering recipient from July 19th through August 30th is the Detroit Justice Center. The Detroit Justice Center is a nonprofit law firm and advocacy organization working to create just cities where every life is valued and supported with dignity and care. DJC is a national organization rooted in Detroit, a city emblematic of both the harms of racial capitalism and the resilience of community-led solutions. DJC engages in legal, policy, and narrative work to inspire the work of building just cities across the nation. Their Just Cities national platform connects the on-the-ground innovation they support in Detroit with growing national efforts to rethink the criminal legal system, safety, land use, and public infrastructure. DJC supports movements and institutions working to end mass incarceration, build equitable economies, and empower communities that have experienced disinvestment.
So let's take a moment and recognize the joys and sorrows among our beloved community today. We only have one submitted, and my apologies that this did not get mentioned last week. There are going to be a few hiccups in our process as I learn how information flows in this beloved community. Dan, whose last name I'm not sure how to pronounce, Kosuth, okay, Dan Kosuth, did submit on the form last week, but I wasn't aware that I was to check the form, a sorrow that I want to recognize. And my apologies, Dan, for not having held this up last week. But Dan's younger brother, John, had a heart attack and passed away on August 1st after many years of living with cardiac disease. And Dan writes, "Ours was a difficult relationship, but I appreciate that we both made the effort to remain on good terms." With that in mind, let's enter into a moment of prayer. In the human experience, we are blessed with joys and sometimes challenged with struggles. As I often say, being human is not easy. So we hold within our minds and hearts thoughtfulness and prayers for those especially carrying sorrows or struggles in life at this time. And we pray that the peace that passeth understanding brings solace, especially to those in need, both within our beloved community and within the greater world at large. And with these thoughts, let us enter into a moment of silent prayer or meditation. So my favorite J.D. Salinger short story is entitled Teddy. Is anybody here familiar with Salinger's Teddy? Not too many folks. It's a very short read. Teddy is about an incarnated yogi who was reborn in America. And in the short story Teddy, this yogi is now a young American boy who's 10 years old. But he was a very advanced yogi, and so he retained some of his yogic powers, and so he fascinates people. So much so that he traveled to Europe to be studied by academics to try to figure out, how does this young man operate? And the story takes place on the way back to America on a large cruise ship. And this scene is from on deck when Teddy and a young man who I think is named Nicholson, are sitting on deck. And Nicholson had heard tell of Teddy, but had not yet met Teddy. And this is part of their conversation. And we'll pick it up when Teddy says to Nicholson, "But I could get out of the finite dimensions fairly often when I was 4. Teddy said as an afterthought, "Not continuously or anything, but fairly often." Nicholson nodded. "You did?" he said. "You could?" "Yes," Teddy said. "That was on the tape. Or maybe it was on the one I made last April. I'm not sure." Nicholson took out his cigarettes again, but without taking his eyes off Teddy, he said, "How does one get out of the finite dimensions?" And he gave a short laugh. "I mean, to begin very basically, a block of wood is a block of wood, for example. It has length, it has width, it hasn't," said Teddy. "That's where you're wrong. Everybody just thinks things keep stopping off somewhere. They don't. That's what I was trying to tell Professor Pete." And he shifted in his seat and he took out an eyesore of a handkerchief, a gray wadded entity, and blew his nose. And he continued, "The reason things seem to stop off somewhere is because that's the only way most people know how to look at things. But that doesn't mean that they do." He put away his handkerchief and he looked at Nicholson. "Hold up your arm for a second," he said. "My arm? Why?" Just do it for a second," said Teddy. So Nicholson raised his forearm an inch or two above the level of his armrest, and he said, "This one?" Teddy nodded, and then he said, "What do you call that?" "What do you mean? It's my arm. It's an arm," said Nicholson. "How do you know it's your arm?" said Teddy. "You know it's called an arm, but how do you know it actually is one? Do you have any proof that it's an arm?" Nicholson took a cigarette out of his pack and he lit it. "I think that smacks of the worst kind of sophistry, frankly," he said, exhaling his smoke. "It's an arm, for heaven's sake, because it's an arm. In the first place, it has to have a name to distinguish it from other objects. I mean, you can't simply—" "You're just being logical," Teddy said to him. "I'm just being what?" Nicholson asked, with a little excess of politeness. "Logical." "You're just giving me a regular, intelligent answer," Teddy said. "I was trying to help you. You asked me how I get out of the finite dimensions when I feel like it. Well, I certainly don't use logic when I do it. Logic is the first thing you have to get rid of." Nicholson removed a flake of tobacco from his tongue with his fingers. Teddy continued, "You know Adam?" "Adam who?" said Nicholson. "Adam in the Bible," said Teddy. Nicholson smiled and dryly said, "Not personally." Teddy hesitated. "Don't be angry with me. You asked me a question, and I'm not angry with you, for heaven's sake," said Nicholson. "Okay," Teddy said. He was sitting back in his chair, but his head was turned toward Nicholson, and he continued, "You know that apple that Adam ate in the Garden of Eden, referred to in the Bible? You know what was in that apple? Logic. Logic and intellectual stuff. That was all that was in it. So," he continued, "this is my point. What you have to do is vomit it up if you want to see things as they really are. I mean, if you vomit it up, then you won't have any more trouble with blocks of wood and stuff. You won't see everything stopping off all the time. And you'll know that your arm really is something different if you're really interested to know. Do you know what I mean?" said Teddy. "Do you follow me?" "I follow you," Nicholson said rather shortly. "The trouble is," said Teddy, "most people don't want to see things the way they are. They don't even want to stop getting born and dying off all the time. They just want to keep getting new bodies all the time instead of stopping and staying with God, where it's really nice." He reflected and then said, "I never saw such a bunch of apple eaters," and shook his head. All right, I was going to try the pulpit this morning, but I just can't do it, so give me a second. So I was thinking about this sermon and where the heck I'm taking us all, right? So it's a sermon series, actually, and hopefully most of you were here last week, and if you weren't, maybe you saw it on YouTube, and if you didn't, you might want to go home and watch it on YouTube to make today make more sense. But I am going to do a recap. But I was thinking, what the point of this trajectory is, and as I said last week, I'm talking about the fact that the test of the religious life is the transformation of being, right? How we become better scoundrels tomorrow than we find ourselves to be today. And it reminded me of something I used to say to people that I haven't said in a while, but I think it's a really good question to help us all remember what this is about. And so I used to say to people, there are a few facts in life, right? You've heard this. Birth, right? What's another fact? Death. What's another fact? Taxes. And in my great wisdom, I've added a fourth fact of life. The fourth fact of life is every waking moment you must experience life in your own skin. I mean, talk about stating the obvious. And then I would say to people, how's that going for you? And then they remember. So you might think of this sermon series along these lines. How's it going for me living in my own skin today? And I can guarantee you that for most of us, most of the time, it could be going better. And I'm taking us to that better place. So last week, I introduced the notion of scoundrels, and I would just want to do a recap. I tend to go home, have lunch, maybe take a nap, and then critique myself on YouTube. And when I was talking about evolutionary biology last week as the first 40% of the sermon, I thought that was a little rambling. And so I want to do a little bit more linear today with that. And plus, it's always good to recap a little bit for those who weren't here the previous Sunday when you're doing a sermon series. So Taylor, could we get that PowerPoint up and sort of tie my nose to some linear thinking here? And I'm just going to do this with you via PowerPoint. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that there you go. We'll just do one at a time. I'll cue you when I need you to go forward. So, come on now. It was working earlier. All right, I'm going to turn and face this with you all. So last week I introduced the notion of scoundrel. And I said that scoundrel to me is a term of endearment. And so when I use it, I mean it as a term of endearment. And I explained to you why I see the term the way I do. So when I ask you, how's it going for you today, scoundrel? I'm just trying to remind you that being human is hard. And I talked about why it's being hard. And I use it as a reminder to tell you, go easy on yourself. And go easy on the other scoundrels in our lives. Okay, Taylor, next. And I talked about evolutionary psychology, and I basically said a big part of evolutionary psychology is that we are driven to replicate the gene pool. In other words, we are a replication of the genes of those who gave life to us. And if we give life to others, then our aim is to replicate our gene pool. And there's a lot of footnoting to all of this, but we're just going to take that as the central drive of what it means to be a human being, and we can footnote that later in all sorts of discussions I'm sure we will have about this. And in order to replicate hang on, take that one away. I don't want people reading ahead. In order to replicate the gene pool, we need our instinctual drives to function. So to replicate the gene pool, we must succeed with 3 instinctual drives. We must find a mate. We must have a one-on-one relationship who's willing to copulate with us so that we can replicate the gene pool with their aid. We must be able to be a successful member of our tribe. Good luck finding the mate if you're not. And having a sense of belonging in the tribe. And by having a sense of belonging in the tribe, we are able to meet our needs for self-preservation. Okay? So that's the gist of it. We're out to replicate the gene pool as a general rule. This isn't universal. Not everybody is driven by this agenda in life, but most people are. And we need our instinctual drives to succeed in order for that to happen. Okay, Taylor. And so we express our instinctual drives as biological beings in the world, but those are somewhat influenced by our immediate family. Who were our caretakers when we were growing up? If we had siblings, our siblings affect us. As we grow older in life, we begin to engage the peer group. And if you've ever raised a teenager, you realize that once your teen becomes a teen, you are no longer in charge, the peer group's in charge, because that's when that becomes so important to them. And the peer group begins to influence how they express themselves. And over time, as they get older, it's society at large. This could be our coworkers, this could be our adult friends, this could be the stranger on the street. So these are the contexts, our immediate family, our peer group, and then society at large, through which we are to figure out how our instinctual drives are going to play out. That's what I laid out last week. Go ahead, Taylor. And as a result of our instinctual drives in this context in which they develop, we become conditioned beings somewhere around our mid to late 20s. And this is pretty well ensconced in today's evolutionary theory, and most psychologists that I talk to kind of agree that by the time you're 30, you are baked. And I mentioned last week that all of this happens before you become an autonomous agent in the world. It happens before you reach the point in life where you are in charge of your own self and your own destiny. And so you wake up one day on your 30th birthday and you go, "Good Lord, how did I become this Alex?" Well, that's how it happened. And it happens to all of us. And so, next slide if we could, Taylor. As I said, because it happens before we become autonomous agents and we just wake up on our 30th birthday and suddenly there's this thing called Alex that I'm beginning to finally think about. How did this scoundrel come to exist the way he exists in the world? There's some good news implied in that. We're not to blame for being the scoundrels that we are. By the time you became an autonomous agent in the world and reached a point in life where you were capable of reflecting on what it means to be you and who the heck you are and how in the world you show up with others. It had already happened to you. You had no say in the matter. So you're not to blame. And this is why I think it's important. Go easy on yourself. Life is hard. None of us is perfect. And we're not to blame. That's the good news. And by implication, others are not to blame for the scoundrels that we find them to be either. So we need to have grace for ourselves, and we need to have graciousness for others. That's the good news. And then I shared with you the bad news. Taylor? Oh, actually, I said what I did there, this is a scientific explanation of sin and a scientific argument for unconditional love, by the way. You know, I'm always aware that when I speak to a UU congregation, there's always a significant number of rational humanists in the congregation who might struggle with my theism. So I always want to say, and scientifically it works too. So, okay, the next one, Taylor. And so there's the bad news. Once we know we are scoundrels, we are responsible for whom we become from that moment forth. And if you were here last week, you remember I mentioned the story of Jesus and the adulteress. And he said to the adulteress, "Where are those who blame you?" And she said, "There are none." He said, "Neither do I blame you." In other words, I realize you have been unaware of the scoundrel you have been. And then he said to her, "But go your way and sin no more." He was saying to her, "But now you're responsible." So the bad news is, from this point forward, you are responsible for who you become in the world next. So we're talking about a trajectory from the scoundrel we find ourselves to be whenever we wake up in life and begin to think about what in the heck makes this Alex and Alex. And I come to realize there were all sorts of forces, biological and familial and social, that influenced me before I was an autonomous agent and looked in the mirror one day and went, there's that guy. And I finally understand how that guy became that guy. Well, at that moment, when I have some understanding of how that happened, I now realize I have the understanding I need to choose to be different, to choose to take the direction of the formation of my character under my own control from this moment forward, because now I know how it happens. So the good news is you're not to blame. The bad news is you are now responsible. Okay? So I said last week, after I shared that all with you, that the real test of the religious life is the transformation of being. How we become a better scoundrel tomorrow than the scoundrel we find ourselves to be today. In other words, how do we become the person we want to be before we die? And not the moment before we die, but a long time before we die. I want to be the best self I can be now. And that's been a big part of my spiritual journey. I use a lot of my study and practice to cultivate that better part of myself that I want to be present, living in my own skin and to other people I engage in the world. So I asked the question, have you yet become the person you want to be before you die? And suggested, don't wait until the last minute. Take on that task of transformation now. Okay, so you can get rid of that. You did already. So today, I said I would talk to you about how in the world does that transformation take place, right? I laid it all out. I said, we're all scoundrels. And presuming we want to be better scoundrels than the ones we find ourselves to be today, I was going to explain to you this week, how does that transformation take place? Okay? So that's what today's about. And in order to share the answer with you, I have to take the mind to task. That's what I'm doing today with a bunch of Unitarian Universalists. You're already giggling, so I know that this is the topic I need to discuss. So a little bit on Teddy again. So, okay, said Teddy. He was sitting back in his chair, but his head was turned toward Nicholson. You know that apple Adam ate in the Garden of Eden referred to in the Bible? He asked. You know what was in that apple? Logic. logic and intellectual stuff. That's all that was in it. And so this is my point, he said. What you have to do is vomit it up if you want to see things the way they really are. I mean, if you vomit it up, then you don't have any more trouble with blocks of wood and stuff. You won't see everything stopping off all the time, and you'll know that your arm is really just an arm if you're really interested. Do you know what I mean? Do you follow me? And what Teddy's saying there is the mind's a problem on the spiritual journey. And I know my audience, and I know that might chagrin some of us, because we UUs are very proud of our minds. Odds are pretty good you can finish this sentence for me. Unitarian Universalism is the thinking person's religion. You've heard this, right? Raise your hand if you haven't heard that. Okay, most of us have heard that. And we're actually very proud of that, aren't we? We're very proud of the fact that we bring the mind to bear on the religious life. And we should be proud of that. And in fact, it was the use of the rational mind that spurred both the Unitarian and the Universalist movements back in the day, wasn't it? Right? You all know where the term Unitarian came from, right? We took on what? The doctrine of the Trinity. We said that God is one. And the reason we took that on, that heretical stance that we took, for which people were persecuted and died, right? This is part of our history, is because we brought our minds to bear on the study of the New Testament, and we dared to conclude, John Calvin, I know this is very important to your theological structure, but you happen to be wrong. And so Servetus was burned at the stake with the tracts on the errors of the Trinity at his feet at the hands of John Calvin. But that anti-Trinitarian stance spurred the Unitarian movement, one of the many factors. And you know where the term universalist comes from too, right? Now don't forget, I'm also talking to 8 billion people on YouTube, so if this feels redundant to you, there's an audience out there who may not know, right? Where does that come from? Universalist is what? Universal salvation, which was a denial of what? Something very near and dear to John Calvin. Eternal damnation, predestination to be specific. Our Universalist forebears said everybody gets in the club. That's the good news for you watching on YouTube if you don't know what we're about. You get in the club. Everybody gets in the club, right? And we use the power of the thinking mind to critique these theological notions that did not serve the best of our humanity. We have reasons to be proud of our minds. But sometimes I think it goes a little bit too far. Let's have an honest moment. Can we have an honest moment in front of all those folks watching on YouTube? I've been to a lot of UU gatherings in my 30-plus years as a UU minister. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard conversations turn to some iteration about how brilliant we UUs are. Yeah, you're laughing because you know, right? I don't have to convince you, do I? Oh, we get it and they don't, is the intellectual stance that is implicit in a lot of the ways we think about other people in the world. I have even twice now been at parties at UU homes where I literally have watched one UU say to the other, "What is your IQ after all?" Seriously, I've seen that happen twice. So while the mind is important, it can also become a problem if you're over-identified with it. And what the reading of Teddy was all about was over-identification with the mind can actually be a serious impediment on the spiritual journey. And I'm saying this morning it is an impediment to our personal transformation. Do you know the UU jokes? I was shocked when I went to Cincinnati. They didn't know the UU jokes. Do you know the UU joke about the girl and her dead cat? Oh, it's my favorite. There are not many good you jokes, but there are a few, and this one I love, and if you don't like it, laugh anyway, because I need to think you liked it. So there was this little girl who after school was sitting on the curbside in front of her house, and she was crying. She was very upset. And an elderly woman walked by, and she noticed the little girl sitting on the curb crying, very upset. And her heart went out to the little girl, and she said to the little girl, "Why, little girl, on a beautiful day like today, what can have you so sad?" And the little girl looked up at the woman, and she said, "My cat died today when I was at school, and I miss my cat." And the woman said, "Little girl, I know this is hard, but you can be happy because I'm sure your cat is in heaven with Jesus." And the little girl looked at the old woman and she crinkled up her nose and she said, "What would Jesus want with a dead cat?" That's a good one, right? I love that one. Folks, over-identification with the mind, the overuse of the mind can do this to religion, and we have a penchant for it. So, I'm standing here as a minister in the proud intellectual tradition of Unitarian Universalism, suggesting to you that our proud intellectual tradition can be a problem for us, especially if we think the mind can be the means for the transformation of our being. It is not the proper tool to become better scoundrels tomorrow than the scoundrels we find ourselves to be today. That's the takeaway today. I told you I'd tell you how to get there, and I begin by saying it is not the mind. So, I don't get this heavily academic all the time, but I want to spend a few more minutes doing a little bit more academic stuff, and I need to talk for just a minute around how the self is structured, this egoic self that we experience ourselves to be. We are so identified with the mind, as is actually almost everybody, that we tend to think the mind is in charge of the self, right? And the reason we think that is because within a certain dimension of life, the mind is incredibly astute, incredibly powerful, okay? In the quantitative world where things are measured and calculated and manipulated and made, the mind is amazing. And it's very easy for us to observe our mind. If I say to you right now, think for just a second, what thought is going through your mind right now? You'll be able to tell me in a heartbeat. It's that observational. So because it's very powerful within a certain dimension of being, within the quantitative dimension, and because it's so apparent to us with just a little bit of introspection, we tend to think it's in charge. But the truth is, it is the weakest part of the self. What's stronger than the mind? Your emotions. Your emotions are actually stronger than the mind. And in fact, not always. Sometimes your mind can affect or create emotions, but most of the time, your emotions are dictating how your mind interprets the world. Okay? If you're in a state of sadness or anger or loneliness or joy, whatever the case may be, that's going to influence the way your mind interprets what it encounters as you go through your day. So actually, the emotions are more in charge of this self than the mind. I don't have to argue that much, right? You've all had enough life experience to know you change your mood, your mindset changes, right? Okay. What's more powerful than the emotions? The body, your instincts, those drives that I'm talking about. What determined your emotional state? If you can recall 7 days ago, the success or failure of those drives that I talk about. How's your one-on-one relationship going? If it's going well, that instinctual drive, your emotion's good, isn't it? If it's having problems, your emotion's bad, isn't it? If you lose your place in the tribe, your emotion goes down, doesn't it? If you're doing well in your tribe, if you have an honored place, your emotions go up. So our emotions actually are subservient to the drives that we have, okay? So that's how it works. We have the hierarchy of the self inverted. Those drives I've been talking about for 2 weeks, they are what drive you. That fundamentally is your engine. The emotions are next in line, and the mind is last. Okay? So here's why this is important. Academic lecture over. We're almost to the end point of the sermon. I'm telling you how the transformation takes place. So I talked last week about the fact that we have this evolutionary agenda. It plays out through our instincts, and I just explained to you how the self is structured. And this is going on all the time. From the moment you wake up, every instant of your day to the moment you go to bed, you repeat it every day of the week, every week of the year, every year of your life. This is what's happening inside of us. This is how our human mechanism works. And I said when it doesn't work well, we tend to get defensive or reactive. Last week I mentioned that. If I am having a problem with my one-on-one, I hunker down and I tend to go negative. If I am not fitting in with my tribe, I hunker down and I tend to go negative. Most people do this, some iteration of it. And so we basically contract into more of the scoundrel we are. So our life experience tends to ensconce the scoundrel we already find ourselves to be. And if we want to be a better scoundrel, we've got to do something different. And now I've given you all the information you need to understand this is what we have to do different. You have to become just self-aware enough to be able to watch this mechanism that I've explained play out in real time inside of you. And so an example might be, I'm having a problem with my one-on-one. And I can feel the contraction in me. Come on, you've all felt it. And I can feel the anger or the sadness or whatever is happening in me. And I can watch my thoughts begin to turn, and it's building inside of me. And I know that if I pay attention to it for just a few more seconds, I'm going to launch. And I'm going to get my one-on-one back in line with the way I think she should be showing up in the world, or he or they or whoever, right? We all know how this goes. So this happens a lot in life. We struggle in life, we contract, we try to exert ourselves more, and the scoundrel we are just becomes louder. And we don't want to be that anymore. We want to be something different. We want to come from a different place inside us than that habitual conditioned way of being, right? So how do we do that? Well, if we can observe ourselves beginning this process in real time and space, all we have to do is catch that process early enough before it overwhelms us to remember one thing. Pause. Just pause. When you feel the contraction inside you start to build a negative reaction, as you encounter people and world circumstances, whatever the case may be, if you can catch it before it overwhelms you, you just need to remember, I'm going to pause. Because what happens to your physiology when you pause, all of that contraction, all of that impulse, all of that reaction you're about to have is dependent on your physiology. You are getting in a physiological condition to react as the scoundrel you are. Just pause. Take a few breaths. Breath is magic. If you can take 3 slow, deep breaths, it'll change your physiology. It will relax your physiology. And your physiology will not be able to support the reaction you're about to have as the scoundrel you are. In other words, calm down. Chill. And you'll notice that impulse to react will pass. That's your moment of freedom where you can choose not to be the scoundrel you were about to be. you can choose to react differently. So what do you react from? Well, if you can pause, let the mind settle down, let the emotions settle down, let the instincts settle down just enough where you can feel, I can be different here. You have a moment to choose to act differently. From what do you act? I don't expect you to know because I haven't told you yet, but I'm kind of hoping you can guess. Love. You just got a coffee. I owe you one anyway. What better place to react from than love? You want to feel better living in your own skin? Act from love. See how you feel. You want to change your interpersonal dynamics with people you struggle with? Act from love. See the dynamic will shift radically. And you'll feel different about it, and they'll feel different about it. So the pause just creates the spaciousness in you to react from love, to choose. It's a choice to react from love or serenity or charity. You feeling hate? Pause. Let it pass. React from love. You feeling anger? Pause. Let it pass. Act from serenity. You feeling stingy with this person? Pause. Let it pass. Act charitably. I'm talking about the intentional cultivation of the virtues that make us sensational scoundrels. It's that easy. You just got to determine you want to do it. You've got to become self-aware enough to know what's happening with you. Then you just need to learn to take a pause and breathe and act from one of the virtues. So I'm going to bring this to a close here with a poem by Rumi who's talking about this very thing. You all know Rumi. Do you know Rumi's story? He was an academic. I think he taught Islamic jurisprudence or something at a university. And he very, very rationally centered man. And along comes this dervish named Shams of Tabriz. You've heard of Shams of Tabriz? Oh my God, what a character. So the dervishes are Sufis who are walking the path of love. They understand the path is love and the goal is love. And so Shams, as a dervish, walking the path of love, shows up in Rumi's life, and they encounter each other. And Shams has such an impact on Rumi that he abandons the life of the mind and steps on the path of love. And that decision in his life transformed him from a rational academic to a lover of God. And that's why we have all those wonderful poems from Rumi. And this one here exemplifies that life experience he had and what I'm trying to share with you today the best. Rumi writes, "Those who don't feel this love pulling them like a river, those who don't drink dawn like a cup of spring water, or take in sunset like a supper, those who don't want to change, let them sleep. This love is beyond the study of theology, that old trickery and hypocrisy. If you want to improve your mind that way, sleep on. As for me, I've given up on my brain. I've torn the cloth to shreds and I've thrown it away. Indeed, if you're not completely naked, wrap your beautiful robe of words around you and sleep." That's the essence of Rumi's biography, and I think it's the essence of the religious life. So I'm inviting those of you who want to become more sensational scoundrels tomorrow than you are today to consider the path of love. It's not a hard one to understand, but it can take some time to bring into practice. And so we'll end here with a couple of thoughts. This is from the New Testament. Those who love know God. Those who do not love do not know God. And there's a difference between thinking love and knowing love, okay? Those who know love, those who love know God. Those who do not love do not know God, for God is love. Our minds think that we've moved beyond Christianity for a lot of us, but there's a lot of beautiful spiritual grist for the mill in that tradition that I'm going to be pulling out for you from time to time. And the last thought, and then we'll get on with our final hymn. I used to go on pilgrimage to India. Sometime I'll do a travelogue on that so you can all get a sense, those of you who are curious what that was like, to a place called Shantivanam, which means peace forest, and it's in Tamil Nadu in southern India. And it was run for 40-some years by a Benedictine monk named Bede Griffiths. So you had a Benedictine monk running a Hindu ashram. It was an interspiritual experience there. And Bede used to say, he was in his mid-80s when he died, and he had the gray hair and the saffron robe, and his voice was a bit feeble by the time he died, and he would say, it's so important to remember, we come from love. And one day we return to that love. So it only makes sense while we're here to be that love. And they all said, Amen. And they all said, Amen. Thank you. Kay, if you would.
Please stand as you are willing and able to sing hymn number 346, Come, Sing a Song with Me. Come, sing a song with me. Come, sing a song with me. Come, sing a song with me, that I might know your mind.
probably don't need this introduction now, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. Paraphrasing Rumi, a 13th century Persian poet, Islamic scholar, and Sufi mystic who did die over 750 years ago. Yesterday, I was clever. Yesterday, I was clever. So I wanted to change the world. Today, I'm wise, so I'm changing myself. To change, you must face the dragon of your appetites with another dragon, the life energy of the soul. Every new day, even this one, is another chance to change your life. Just one change in thought can lead to a change in your destiny.
And so let us take the next step in love. And let us speak the next word in love. Let us think the next thought in love. Let us breathe the next breath in love. So that when we take action in the world, we can take action in love. Blessed be. I'm delighted to be with you.